God bless you. Today we are continuing in the New Jerusalem Holy Bible, and we are in 1 Kings at, let's see, verse 35 in chapter 20. A prophet condemns Ahab's policy. At Yahweh's command, a member of the brotherhood of prophets said to a companion of his, "Strike me." But the man refused to strike him. So he said to him, "Since you have disobeyed Yahweh's order the very moment you leave me, a lion will kill you." And no sooner had he left him than he met a lion which killed him. The prophet then went to find another man and said, "Strike me." And the man struck him and wounded him. The prophet then went and stood waiting for the king on the road, disguising himself with a bandage over his eyes. As the king passed, he called out to him, "Your servant was making his way to where the fight was thickest, when someone left the fighting to bring a man to me and said, 'Guard this man. If he is found missing, your life will pay for his, or else you will have to pay 1 talent of silver.' But your servant was busy with one thing and another. The man disappeared." The king of Israel said, "That is your sentence then. You have pronounced it yourself." At this the man quickly pulled off the bandage over his eyes, and the king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. He said to the king, "Yahweh says this: Since you let the man escape who was under my curse of destruction, your life will pay for his, your people for his people." And the king of Israel went home, gloomy and out of temper, back to Samaria. Section D. Naboth's vineyard. Naboth refuses to hand over his vineyard. Chapter 21. This is what happened next. Naboth of Jezreel had a vineyard close by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard to be my vegetable garden, since it adjoins my palace. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or, if you prefer, I will give you its value in money." Naboth, however, said to Ahab, "Yahweh forbid that I should give you my ancestral heritage." Ahab and Jezreel. Ahab went home gloomy and out of temper at the words of Naboth of Jezreel. "I will not give you my heritage from my ancestors. He lay down on his bed and turned his face away and refused to eat. His wife Jezebel came to him. "Why are you so dispirited," she said, "that you refuse to eat?" He said, "I have been talking to Naboth of Jezreel. I said, 'Give me your vineyard either for money, or if you prefer, for another vineyard in exchange.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" Then his wife Jezebel said, "Some king of Israel you make. Get up, eat, and take heart. I myself shall get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." Jezreelite. Naboth is murdered. So she wrote a letter in Ahab's name and sealed it with his seal, sending the letter to the elders and notables of the cities where Naboth lived. In the letter she wrote, "Proclaim a fast and put Naboth in a prominent place among the people. There confront him with a couple of scoundrels who will accuse him as follows: 'You have cursed God and the king.' Then take him outside and stone him to death." The men of Naboth's city and the elders and the notables living in his city did what Jezebel ordered, as was written in the letter which she had sent him. They proclaimed a fast and put Naboth in a prominent place among the people. The two scoundrels then came and confronted him, and the scoundrels then publicly accused Naboth as follows: "Naboth has cursed God and the king. He was then taken outside the city and stoned to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, Naboth has been stoned to death. When Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, "Get up, take possession of the vineyard which Naboth of Jezreel refused to sell you, for Naboth is no longer alive, he is dead." When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth of Jezreel and take possession of it. Elijah pronounces God's sentence. Then the word of Yahweh came to Elijah the Tishbite. "Up, go down to meet Ahab king of Israel in Samaria. You will find him in Naboth's vineyard. He has gone down to take possession of it. You are to say this to him: Yahweh says this: You have committed murder, and now you usurp as well. For this, and Yahweh says this: in the place where the dogs licked the blood of Naboth, the dogs will lick your blood too." Ahab said to Elijah, "So you have caught me, O my enemy." Elijah answered, "I have caught you for your double dealing. And since you have done what is displeasing to Yahweh, I shall now bring disaster down on you. I shall sweep away your descendants and wipe out every man-jack of the house of Ahab, fettered or free in Israel. I shall treat your house as I treated the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and of Baasha, son of Ahijah, for provoking my anger and leading Israel into sin. Against Jezebel too Yahweh spoke these words: the dogs will eat Jezebel in the field of Jezreel. Those of Ahab's family who die in the city, the dogs will eat, and those who die in the open country, the birds of the air will eat. And indeed, there never was anyone like Ahab for double dealing and for doing what is displeasing to Yahweh. Urged on by Jezebel his wife, he behaved in the most abominable way, adhering to idols, just as the Amorites had, whom Yahweh had disposed for the Israelites. Ahab repents. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his garments and put sackcloth next to his skin and fasted. He slept in the sackcloth. He walked with slow steps. Then the word of Yahweh came to Elijah the Tishbite. "Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Since he has humbled himself before me, I shall not bring the disaster in his days. I shall bring the disaster on his house in his son's days." Section E. Another war with Aram. Ahab plans a campaign against Ramoth in Gilead. Chapter 22. There was a lull of 3 years with no fighting between Aram and Israel. Then in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, paid a visit to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his officers, "You are aware that Ramoth in Gilead belongs to us, and yet we do nothing to wrest it away from the king of Aram." He said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you come with me to attack Ramoth in Gilead?" Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, "I will be as you, my men as yours, my horses as yours." The spurious prophets predict success. Jehoshaphat, however, said to the king of Israel, "First, please inquire what the word of Yahweh is." The king of Israel then called the prophets together, about 400 of them. "Should I go and attack Ramoth in Gilead," he asked, "or should I hold back?" "Go ahead," they replied, "for Yahweh has already given it to the king." Jehoshaphat, however, said, "Is there no other prophet of Yahweh here, so that we can inquire through him?" The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, There is one more man through whom we can consult Yahweh, but I hate him because he never has a favorable prophecy for me. Only unfavorable ones. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah. I hope the king's words are unjustified, said Jehoshaphat. The king of Israel then summoned a court official and said, "Bring Micaiah, son of Imlah, immediately." The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, were sitting each on his throne, wearing their robes, in an open space just outside the gate of Samaria, with all the prophets in a state of ecstasy before them. Zedekiah, son of Kenaniah, who had made himself some iron horns, said, "Yahweh says, with horns like these you will gore the Arameans till you make an end of them." And all the prophets cried ecstatically in the same vein, saying, "March on Ramoth and Gilead. Success is sure, for Yahweh has already given it to the king." The prophet Micaiah predicts defeat. The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, "Look here. What the prophets are saying is uniformly favorable to the king. I hope you will say the same as they do, and speak favorably." Micaiah said, "As Yahweh lives, I shall speak as Yahweh tells me." When he came to the king said, "Micaiah, should we go and attack Ramoth and Gilead, or should we hold back?" He replied, "Go ahead. Success is sure, for Yahweh has already given it to the king." The king then said, "How often must I put you on oath to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh?" Then he spoke out, "I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep without a shepherd. And Yahweh said, 'These have no master. Let them go home safely.'" At this the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he never gives me favorable prophecies, but only unfavorable ones?" Micaiah went on, "Now listen to the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh seated on his throne, with the whole array of heaven standing by him, and on his right and on his left. Yahweh said, 'Who will entice Ahab into marching to his death at Ramoth in Gilead?' At which some answered one way and some another. A spirit then came forward and stood before Yahweh and said, 'I will entice him.' 'How?' Yahweh asked it. He replied, 'I shall go and be a deceptive spirit in the mouths of all his prophets.' Yahweh said, 'You will succeed in enticing him. Go and do it.' And now, you see, Yahweh has put a deceptive spirit in the mouth of all your prophets here. For in fact, Yahweh has pronounced disaster on you." Hezekiah, son of Chenaniah, then came up, struck Micaiah on the cheek, and said, "Which way did Yahweh's spirit leave me to speak to you?" "That is what you will find out," Micaiah retorted, "the day you go from room to room trying to hide." The king of Israel said, "Seize Micaiah, and hand him over to Amon, governor of the city, and Joash, the king's son, and say, 'These are the king's orders. Put this man in prison and feed him on nothing but bread and water until I am home safely.'" Micaiah said, "If you ever do get home safely, Yahweh has not spoken through me." Ahab falls at Ramoth in Gilead. The king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, march on Ramoth in Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "I shall disguise myself to go into battle, but you put on your robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had given his chariot commanders the following order: Do not attack anyone of whatever rank except the king of Israel." So when the chariot commanders saw Jehoshaphat, they thought, "That is obviously the king of Israel," and surrounded him to attack. But when Jehoshaphat shouted his war cry, the chariot commanders, realizing that he was not the king of Israel, broke off their pursuit. Someone, however, drawing his bow without any special aim, shot the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. "Turn about," said the king to his charioteer. "Get me out of the fighting. I am collapsing." But the battle grew fiercer as the day went on, and the king had to be held upright in his chariot, facing the Arameans, the blood from the wound running into the bottom of the chariot, until in the evening he died. At sundown a shout ran through the ranks. "Every man back to his town! Every man back to his country! The king is dead!" He was taken to Samaria, and in Samaria the king was buried. They washed the chariot at the pool of Samaria. The dogs licked up the blood, and the prostitutes washed in it, in accordance with the word which Yahweh had spoken. And we'll pick up there on, let's see, that would be, whoa, we're almost at the end. I'm going to continue. It's just a little bit more, and we'll have finished the first book of Kings. After the death of Ahab, the end of the reign of Ahab. The rest of the history of Ahab, his entire career, the ivory house he erected, all the towns he built, this is not recorded in the book of the annals of the is this not recorded in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? When Ahab fell asleep with his ancestors, his son Ahaziah succeeded him. Ahaziah. The reign of Jehoshaphat in Judea, 870 to 848. Jehoshaphat, son of Asa, became king of Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he came to the throne, and he reigned for 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shilhi. In every way he followed the example of his father Asa, undeviatingly, doing what is pleasing to Yahweh. The high places, however, were not abolished. The people still offered sacrifice and incense on the high places. Jehoshaphat was at peace with the king of Israel. The rest of the history of Jehoshaphat, the valor he showed, the wars he waged, is this not recorded in the book of annals of the kings of Judah? The few male sacred prostitutes left over from the days of his father, Asa expelled from the country. At the time, Edom had no king, and King Jehoshaphat built ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold. But they never made the voyage, since the ships were wrecked at Ezion-Geber. Ahaziah, son of Ahab, then proposed to Jehoshaphat, "Let my men go to sea with yours." But Jehoshaphat would not agree. When Jehoshaphat fell asleep with his ancestors, he was buried in the city of his ancestor David. His son Jehoram succeeded him. King Ahaziah. I can't pronounce this for some reason. Ahaziah. Ahaziah of Israel, 853 to 852, and the prophet Elijah. Ahaziah, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned over Israel for 2 years. He did what is displeasing to Yahweh by following the example of his father and mother and of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had led Israel into sin. He served Baal and worshipped him, and provoked the anger of Yahweh, God of Israel, just as his father had done. And that's the end of First Kings. And I guess next time, God willing, it'll be the beginning of the second book of Kings. And as always, I love you.